right. Yeah. Good evening, everybody on the other side and people here. It's beautiful evening in London. Yeah. Yeah. So another evening on the karma topic, karma. And yeah, why do we need to know about karma? Basically, in order to understand the need for practicing morality, it's based on the teaching of karma, understanding cause-effect relationship, and then think about the morality, for example, of individual liberation. Yeah, wanting to eliminate, first of all suffering and the causes, in particular the afflictions, you know, and then all the way up, if you like, the morality of the bodhisattvas, yeah, to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. So generate a kind of motivation to eliminate all afflictions, or yeah, wanting to eliminate all obscurations to omniscience, to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. So generate either of those or related motivations for yourself. And then, if you like, imagine in front Sakyamuni Buddha surrounded by the masters of India, Tibet, and the other Buddhist traditions, and surrounding yourself on the individual sentient beings undergoing various types of mental and physical sufferings, and think, I have to help them, and I start helping them with leading them into the prayer. Yeah.
To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and of human beings, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. The indescribable, inconceivable, and inexpressible perfection of wisdom, unproduced, unceasing nature of space, object of the uniquely known transcendental wisdom, to the mother of the victorious one, 3 times I prostrate. Tayata gati paragati parasamgati bodhisoha. Tayata gati paragati parasamgati bodhisoha. Tayata gati paragati parasamgati bodhisoha.
Sangye Jodan Zoni Zona Ganjo Bado Dani Gazo Ji Dagi Juju Gibeson Dola Penje Sangye Doba Jo Sangye Jodan Zoni Ganjo Bado Dani Gazo Ji Dagi Juju Gibe Dola Penje Sangye Doba Jo Sangye Jodan Zoni Ado Dani Gazu Ji Dagi Juju Gibe Dola Penche Sangye Doba Yeah, so we just read the completely perfect, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and a good conduct, you know. So the Buddha basically has this kind of omniscience, right? So for us, certain aspects of karma we can understand, as we talked about previously, that anger causes kind of disturbance of the mind, yeah, that cause and effect relationship we can understand, right? But there are more complex aspects of karma, right? That we talked about previously, you know, like the weather, for example, is a very complex system. It's very difficult to predict what the weather will be tomorrow, you know, or in a few hours' time, for example. So there's a very complex system of various causes and conditions and variables influencing each other. Then it becomes more and more complex, right? We talked about it. And then if you take that every single second, there is physical, sometimes verbal, but for sure, mental activity. Yeah, so having those activities every split second, and that when that activity comes to an end, that information is not lost, as we call it in scientific terms, right? So that means that that potential of that particular activity is remains, you know, and that can come to ripening when it meets the right conditions. Yeah, so that what we mean karma can be very complex. If you think about, you have done activities, let's say, since you were born, right? Just take that into account. So you count how many years, you multiply that with amount of seconds, and then you multiply that with various states of mind. So you come to billions and billions and billions of moments of consciousness with negative thoughts, sometimes positive thoughts, neutral thoughts. So you can imagine that all those habituation patterns, although very short of period of time, they leave their potential in the future to have a similar thought, right? Or if you think about, as we discussed many times, previous lifetimes, then it becomes even more complex, right? Because there's more variables of various states of existence that can play a role, you know. So you can see that karma becomes very complex to be really understood. Yeah. So certain aspects we can understand, that anger causes suffering, that we can understand, but the complexity of us being here, when and where did each of one of us create the cause for this? Yeah, we say, yeah, there was an interest, and then I showed up, and then, you know, I signed up for the course and I came. But that initial interest, where did it come from? That came from a previous moment of interest, and that came from a previous moment of interest. So it's very difficult to really understand what was the initial liking these aspects of spiritual path, right? Where did it come from? So there's a very complex system of cause and effect relationships, which can only be more understood if you have certain types of clairvoyance, as we call it, or in particular omniscience, like the Buddha, right? So it says in the verse, in the first verse we just read, that perfect in knowledge and a good conduct. Yeah, so perfect in knowledge means that the Buddha has this perfect knowledge of omniscience, you know, knowing everything. And so then, based on that aspect, the Buddha examined the reality, and in particular also the law of cause and effect, right? And then, based on having seen the law of cause and effect, made kind of practice of morality. Why? Because we want happiness and we don't want suffering. So then we have to live in accordance to this law, right? And we talked about a few times before, we cannot change the law, but we can play with causes and conditions, right? We cannot change that that CO2 in the atmosphere heats up the planet. We cannot change that reality, but we can prevent ourselves from a big disaster and producing more CO2, right? So there's certain aspects we can do something with, but certain aspects we cannot do anything with. Yeah, that's the kind of laws of reality. So within our continuum of consciousness, the same thing. And then the Buddha said, okay, if you want happiness, don't want suffering, practice morality, right? So live in accordance to the law of cause and effect, don't harm self and others, and then you create causes for happiness, and you eliminate causes for suffering. And so that's kind of what we say, perfect in knowledge and a good conduct, Sagata know the world, supreme guide of human beings, to be tamed. Because if you practice morality, you over time will tame your mind, right? If you don't harm others in physical and verbal behaviors, then over time you might also start to produce less negative thoughts in relation with others, right? It's easier not to punch a person in the face than it is to shout at the person, right? It's easier not to shout at the person than to have a negative thought towards the person. Yeah, so there's a level of training immorality of body, speech, and mind. Yeah. So that's the introduction to this evening talk. So last week we talked about the 4 principles of karma, right? That karma is kind of definite in the sense that non-virtue produces suffering and virtue produces happiness, and not the other way around. Yeah, so karma definite in the sense the law of reality is definite and we cannot change that law, right? As we just talked about with the CO2 aspect, same thing. Certain aspects we cannot change, but we can play with conditions to move in a particular direction, right? So that's the same with karma. Yeah, that karma is definite. We contemplated, and then also we contemplated the increase. Yeah, like a seed can produce a plant with various fruits. Yeah, so karma, one moment of consciousness can produce a huge result. Yeah, or one particular activity can produce a huge result. Yeah, we talked about the karma, the second point, karma of increase. Then we also talked about that karma is kind of individual. Remember that you cannot experience the result that is created by somebody else. Yeah, karma, because our consciousness is individual, our experience is individual, the things we taste or we hear. You know, some people like particular songs and some people do not like. So then sometimes you have those people in the car and then putting on the volume and they think, oh, everybody likes this. Or the motorcyclists, or you have these cars with extra noise coming out when they push the gas, you know, that like the motorcyclists really know that, right? In London there's quite a few. So then they think, wow, and especially in a tunnel or something like Waterloo, there's this tunnel and then that's the echo comes and they think, oh wow, am I great today? It's amazing, isn't it? But other people think, oh man, what a noise. Yeah. So you can see it's very individually based, right? Our experience is very much individually based, you know. So that's also with karma. We cannot experience the result that is created by somebody else because we have individual streams of consciousness. Yeah, that was point number 3. And then also we talked about karma doesn't get to waste until it meets the conditions and comes to ripening. Yeah, and we also talked about it's possible to destroy negative karma by purification, for example, as we're going to talk about next week. Next week, we're going to talk about how to purify negative karma created in the past. And karma, so then you see that karma is not kind of permanent. Like some people say, oh, it's my karma, that's how it is, you know, that's how I am, and there's no change possible, that's how it is. That's completely misunderstood, right? Because we can change karma. Yeah, that example of astrology you went into, the more you engage in purification practices, the more flexible things are. Yeah, so we're going to talk about it next week, about purification aspect. Yeah, so we talked about last week, and we also talked about ripening result. Remember that you get a ripening result in the sense of a rebirth, either positive or negative in a future lifetime. Yeah. And we talked about results similar to the cause, an experience similar to the cause, and an activity similar to the cause. Meaning you experience a sickness, which is not random. Sickness is there's a condition of cold weather, for example, but from the inside, there's a cause for getting a cold, right? Yeah. So there's a kind of an experience according to the cause. And then we also talked about activity according to the cause, right? Some little children, they like to kill insects, while some children like to save insects, right? So there's a kind of a pattern that is an habituation pattern that might not come from the parents, for example, yeah, or interest of children. Sometimes very interesting to see. I take my own person as an example. My parents were initially not really very religious, you know, and no interest in Buddhism. And then their son, you know, a bit crazy guy, then he goes into Buddhism, right? So that means that interest doesn't come from the parents in this case, right? So there's a kind of individual interest that might have been created before, as we talked about previously. Yeah, so there's a kind of an action according to the course. Yeah, and also we talked about environmental results. You know, that you can born in a place where there's a lot of peace, but you can also born in a place where there's a lot of violence or war or famine, or you know. So there's kind of what the environmental aspects, because that's also related to cause and effect relationship, right? Wherever we go, wherever we're born, it all has to do with law of cause and effect. Nothing is random in Buddhism, as we say. Okay, so that's what we talked about a little bit last week. So this evening, I was planning to talk about those points in relation with the 10 non-virtuous actions. Yeah, so you get a little bit idea what is actually doing what, if you talk about that in relation with the 10 non-virtuous. Yeah, yeah, okay. My Spanish friends, okay, Kiko, with the connection today or no? Yeah, okay, sorry. Yeah, the other day we had some obstacles. So then you get a little bit idea what karma, when you act in a particular way, and what kind of the results are, you know. So karma is still quite challenging. It's not only for you, but for many people who are into Buddhism for a long period of time, karma is just difficult to be understood, right? And that also has to be known, because many aspects of the spiritual path are not easy. You know, to change your mind is not easy. Law of cause and effect is not easy. But at least we should try to see what is going on, and if it is true or not, and examine if it's true or not, right? Never really straight away accept what the Buddha said, but examine all aspects of the Buddhist teachings and then relate it to the teachings on karma, right? So that's kind of quite important. I know myself, when I just started the Buddhism, also karma is, for example, very challenging. Certain aspect of karma is quite challenging, but yeah, over time you just examine more and check things out more, and then, in particular, if that's what I found, because certain aspects of karma, what we say, are very hidden phenomena. We cannot really see it, we cannot feel it or hear it or touch it. We cannot really completely understand it when we think about it, right? So that's why it's challenging, you know. But even in science, there's so many aspects in science. Just look into quantum mechanics. Most people, they honestly say, you know, the masters in Wyman, for example, used to say that I know that I don't really understand quantum mechanics, and I also know that nobody else does. So that means that there are many aspects in reality we just don't know, really understand, but certain aspects of the reality, or how that those hidden variables, as David Bohm calls it, or the intrinsic order, yeah, as he calls it, that has a relation with the things we can know, right? That has a relation with the explicit order, for example, right? So that we can examine, and the relationship we can study. Yeah, so that's kind of important also to understand that we cannot understand everything from scratch, you know. So that's kind of an acceptance should be there, and then openness to examine and check things out, you know. Yeah, that's kind of important aspect of karma. Okay, so let's have a look at the 10 non-virtuous, you know. And we'll have a look first at the act of killing. Yeah, so killing is, in general speaking, kind of non-virtue of the body, right? The act of killing, ending somebody else's life, you know. So the ripening result, we just talked about ripening results last week. The ripening result of the act of killing is basically being reborn in a lower state of existence. So there are various states of existence within samsara, yeah, higher states, lower states. And if that all exists or not, that's another question for yourself to examine. And I think we went in this, I'm not sure, in this class, if you first of all, if you accept reincarnation, that's the first thing you have to check out, right? So if you check out reincarnation, if you on a certain point of time think, okay, there's more reasons to that reincarnation exists, then there are reasons for reincarnation not to exist. Yeah, so you can analyze that. We went over many times: continuity of consciousness, near-death experience, children remembering previous lifetimes, right? Those kind of studies within science can help us to examine more about rebirth. Yeah, if that's the case, and you think, okay, I always been human, then you go at the human lives on this planet, and you see that 40,000 years ago, we were slightly looking differently, right? So if that's possible to be born in those kind of states, then you go another 10,000 or few 10,000 years back, and then we're another kind of looking, or you go to another planet and people look completely different. We think they are strange, but they think we are strange, right? When they look at these earthlings, like, ooh, look at those earthlings. They use fossil fuels in these noisy machines to move around. So they might look to us in a very kind of completely different way. As we look at them as them being strange, they look at us as us being strange, right? Yeah, it's just because we're so habituated to our human life, so then we think, oh, it's not possible to have any other form of life, right? Yeah, but yeah, there's no reason why not. You know? So you examine that, and then you can come to the conclusion that it's possible, as we did before, that there's a possibility of being born in various states of existence. So what is the cause of being born in these lower states of existence? That is here in this first aspect, the act of killing, right? A ripening result can be born in one of the lower states of existence or lower realms. Yeah. So that's the ripening result, and then the result similar to the cause. Remember, we talked about the result similar to the cause. So the ripening result is a completion, or a kind of throwing karma, as we call it, that throws you into a rebirth. You know, ripening result meaning it throws you. Yeah, it's a kind of a result that has the capacity to throw you in a rebirth. Yeah, after that. Yeah. So that's the lower realms, and then the result similar to the cause, we said, is twofold, right? An experience and an action, similar to the cause. So an experience, if you engage in a lot of killing, an experience might be to have a short life, for example. Yeah, in one of the future states of existence. Yeah, because if you act in the killing, then you stop the life force of others, and then you might be killed yourself or have a short life. Here again, karma is not that fixed, that if you kill person A, then person A is reborn in your next life and kills you. It's not that. I saw once a movie on the Indian, a Kannada movie in the bus from Kasa, from Mysore to Bangalore, and then you're almost forced to look at the screen because it's quite noisy. The sound, so you think, oh, what's going on? Yeah, so I looked up, and there were these two brothers holding their hands, and the mother was kidnapped, and they were killed in the process, and they were born as brothers again, and they took revenge to the person who kidnapped their mother. Yeah, that's karma is not like that. You know, it's very complex. You know, you kill one person in this life, and then maybe hundreds life down the line with certain other forms of cause and effect relationships that comes to ripening, right? It's not that straightforward, you know. It's very, you have to think about an incredible complex system of cause and effect relationships, and that depends on certain conditions to come to ripening. And that's not that straightforward, right? It's very complex. Just think about a computer model, you know, with countless variables, you know, that influence each other. It's a very complex system, you know? So it's a little bit like that. Yeah, so the experience, according to the cause, is that you have a short life, for example. Yeah. Then the action, according to the cause, if you engage in killing in this life, you might do the same in a future life. Yeah, that's just the habituation pattern that carries on. Yeah, so we know our habituations carries on. So the experience, the action according to the cause is exactly this habituation pattern. If you engage a lot of killing in this life, you might engage in a similar thing in another life, right? And then you create more and more negative karma. Yeah, so that's kind of the action according to the cause. And then the environmental kind of results, yeah, for example, you engage in act of killing, you're not born in lower states of existence, but as a human again, then you might be born in a war zone or with a lot of gang violence, or yeah, the environment also is accordance to a previous kind of cause being created, right? Yeah, nothing is beyond law of cause and effect. Everything is related with law of cause and effect. Yeah. So there's environmental results. Yeah, so that's from the act of killing. Then for an act of stealing, Tibetan we say Majen Lempa, means actually stealing means taking what is not given with a particular value, yeah, particular value that it has. So there's a lot of debate what the value actually is in various scriptures, but it comes down to when it's punishable under law, then that's kind of an act of stealing, right? When you take something that is punishable under law, then that's what we consider as a complete act of stealing. So the ripening result of stealing is, again, being born in one of the lowest states of existence. Yeah, one of the three lowest states of existence, either animal, spirit, or hell being. If those stages exist or not, that's the question, and you have to ask it for yourself. But, you know, animals, we know they exist, and spirits, some people know, some people don't, and some people think no, and some people do. Yeah, so that's kind of check things out, right? If you think about when consciousness leaves this physical body, then it's kind of spirit-like, right? So it goes into the bardo, wanted immediate state, as we talked about in the previous model. And that's a kind of a very subtle mental body, you could say, right? Very subtle form body. Yeah, that can go straight through walls. You know, we don't see intermediate state beings. Yeah, we don't see when a person is passing away, we don't see the consciousness going somewhere. Yeah, so that's kind of, then if you think about those aspects, then maybe spirits exist or not, right? That's kind of, you can check that out. Yeah. So with stealing, the ripening result, same as the ripening result of killing, is one of the lowest states of existence. Yeah. And then the results, similar to the cause, again, is twofold, right? We have an experience and an action. Yeah. So the experience is lacking wealth or possessions, or, you know, things get lost or stolen from you, right? If you act in a lot of stealing, then you might create causes that others steal from you, or that you lose things, or yeah. So yeah. So don't engage in stealing, right? That's what it says. If you want wealth, you practice generosity, for example. If you practice generosity, you get more. You know, so that's kind of, if you give, you get more. So then you can give more, and then you get more. So you can give even more. Yeah, it's kind of the cause and effect relationship. Yeah. So the experience, similar to the cause, is lacking wealth or possessions or resources. Yeah. The action, again, similar to the cause, you might again have the tendency to steal again, right? Because that's the habituation pattern that carries on. The action according to the cause, if you steal a lot in this life, you might engage again in stealing in the next life. Yeah. Yeah. So that's very interesting if you study, I mentioned that a few times, the case studies of Stevenson's research on children remembering previous lifetimes, what is the character of the previous personality and what is the character in the present personality. It's very interesting sometimes how habituation patterns carry on, you know. Yeah, that's very, very interesting cases like that. Okay, and then the environmental results of stealing, you know, being born in a place where it's difficult to have harvest, or crops are rare, or shortage of food, or climate disasters that prevent you from having food and shelter and possessions, for example, you know. Yeah, so the environmental results also that particular environmental disasters, or what do you call it, natural disasters, right, can destroy your houses or your possessions or cars or whatsoever. Yeah, so the environmental results. Yeah. So then people will ask, oh, okay, so my car was stolen, so that means that I stole a car in my previous lifetime, is it? It's not that straightforward, right? It's kind of, you might have stolen something similar value or similar conditions, right? It's a kind of very complex system, you know, that's important to understand the complexity rather than, because if we talk about in this kind of straightforward outline, then it looks all very direct related, right? But it's a very, very complex system, you know? Yeah. Okay, that's about stealing. Yeah, the three aspects of ripening results: lower rebirths and the result similar to the cause of lacking wealth, the experience, for example, and engaging the action, engaging again, a tendency to steal, and an environment being born in areas where there's a lot of it's a lot of kind of shortage of food or very poor areas. Okay, that is stealing. Yeah, so killing, in general speaking, within the 10 non-virtues, we talk about killing of a human being, right? But any form of killing in general is kind of negative. Yeah, so if animals are sentient, there's a lot of very interesting research that proves that various types of animals have feeling, right? So that they are sentient, you know. So that's kind of interesting because, yeah, I think a few decades ago, then people thought only humans were sentient, something like that. But yeah, it's very obvious that when a dog comes and you pet the dog or the cat, then they want to be with you, right? And sometimes I see on Zoom, people, the cats or the dogs, they walk in front of back and forth. Yeah. So they like that, but when you push them away or something, they don't like that, right? So that means there is a concept of something liking and something disliking, right? So that's very obvious, yeah. Whatever research you do, but just from a subjective point of view, it's quite obvious that animals have feeling as well, you know. So yeah, killing, in general speaking, among the 10 non-virtues is killing human being, but killing any form of life is basically negative, right? So killing also insect or mosquito or whatsoever. Also fly, when you do like this, then the fly goes away, right? Because it fears something. Yeah, so that's pretty obvious that even insects have feeling. Yeah, so in Buddhism we say there's no need for a physical brain to have feeling, for example, right? So also intermediate state beings have feeling, right? There's no physical brain there, you know. Or when you study the near-death experience, people have a perception, people have a feeling with that perception. Well, clinically, at that time, this EEG goes flat, you know, there's no brain activity to be measured. Yeah, so that's very interesting cases that you can see even in the near-death experience when a person is clinically dead, but still has a perception, and they talk about it and they explain it and they can be validated, and there's a feeling with that, right? So that means, yeah, feeling doesn't have to, from the Buddhist point of view, directly be related with the physical body as humans have, with all the neurons. And of course, there's a correlation between the neurons and aspects of the body, but that doesn't imply that that's always needed for consciousness to have feeling. Yeah, so killing can be any living creature. That is, by killing that is negative in general. Stealing, yeah, I said before, an object that is suitable of a particular value, right, within the 10 non-virtues, a particular value that is punishable under law, then it actually falls in that category. Then sexual misconduct. So generally speaking, there's various types, so we keep it simple today. So for example, having sexual relationship and then a particular sexual intercourse with a person who has somebody else's, who is a partner of somebody else without consent of that partner, right? So that's kind of, we know that's harmful, right? If you go have a sexual intercourse with a person who has a partner and the other partner doesn't know about it or there's no consent, then of course there's a problem, right? Yeah. So that's what we call sexual misconduct, for example. Yeah, or rape, those kind of things are being quite straightforward. That's very harmful. Yeah. So the ripening results of those kind of activities is also a result in the lower states of existence, right? If all the factors are complete, so to say. Then the result similar to the cause is twofold again: experience and action, you know. So experience, you know, you might, relationships might easily break up or you would separate it from family and friends, for example, you know. that's a kind of similar kind of results according to that action, right? Yeah, so that's kind of, yeah. Then that's the experience according to the cause, and then the kasa, the action according to the cause is engaging again in adultery and kind of these kind of misbehaviors of sexual behavior, right? Sexual misconduct. So the tendency to be unfaithful or to those things again and again. And then the environmental result is often indicated as a dirty place or you know, unclean kind of places. You know, that's the environmental result of kasa, sexual misconduct. So that are the three. We come to those more specific points in the next kasa, in the next explanation. Yeah, we just only now go over the 10 non-virtues in relation with those ripening results similar to the cause and environment result. And after that, we go into a more detailed explanation. What is actually each of those 10? Yeah. So the environmental result for sexual misconduct is kind of, yeah, dirty places. Yeah. Okay. So that are the three, what do we call that? The three negativities or negative activities of the body, right? So the 10 non-virtues, we have 3 of the body, 4 of the speech, and 3 of the mind. Yeah, we just covered the 3 of the body of killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, right? So the physical activities, right? Physical activities of the body. Now there's 4 in relation with verbal activities, you know, and the first one is lying, you know. So the same if the lying is all complete and it's really deceiving a person in a particular very negative way, then it can create causes for lower states of rebirth. Yeah, so the ripening results of lying can be very similar. Again, can be a state in lower rebirth. It doesn't always pervade that you say something and you think, oh, I lied now I go to the lower realms, you know. So the various factors have to be complete, and we come to that in a few minutes time. Yeah. So the ripening result in general, if all the factors are complete, that can be a state in lower states of existence. Yeah. Then the result similar to the cause, twofold again, experience. Yeah. So an experience can be, for example, although you tell the truth, people don't believe you. So if you it's in one way it's true. You know, people who lie a lot, and you know they're lying, you don't believe them anymore, right? So then you just walk away. Yeah. So if you lie a lot, then in the future you will meet people who don't believe you, even though you might say the truth at that time. Yeah, so that means lying has this kind of experience similar to the cause. You know. Yeah. Then action similar to the cause is, yeah, tendency to lie and deceive again and again. If you do that a lot in this life, then in the future lifetime, you might again have the tendency to lie again, right? Yeah, so, and that propels itself, and then you create more negative karma. So that's the danger with the habituation patterns are very strong, you know. So in Buddhism, we talk so much about generating constructive forms of consciousness and positive states of mind, and habituate yourself to that, because those habituations are not lost, right? They carry on in future states of existence, and the more we generate positive states of mind, the easier it will become over time. And so that's kind of why we put always so much, and that's exactly what the Tibetan term gom or for meditation means, right? The real meaning of meditation is to habituate yourself to a positive pattern. The habituation is very essential, because if you habituate yourself to a positive pattern, then over time you keep doing that same thing, right? And you keep moving in a good direction. Well, if you go the other way, you end up in more and more trouble. And so you see that people, criminals, for example, when they come in prison, and some persons, they treat them much better than others, so there's an opportunity to change their mind. If they don't do that, then there's a possibility to fall back again after they come out of prison, and the same hassle happens over again, right? So that's kind of the habituation patterns it's possible to change, right? And it's definitely possible to change. And these changes have to be made, you know, as we put so much emphasis on, and this Holberg prison in Norway proves the possibility, because they, with their system, they prove there's less percentages of the inmates falling back to old habits. So it is possible, even with criminals, right? So it's possible with criminals, then it's also possible with us as well as human beings, right? So that change is possible, you know? Yeah. But if you don't do that, then you keep having these kind of habituation patterns, and that continues, and yeah, that causes problems. Okay, so lying, the ripening with a low rebirth, similar to the cause experience. People don't believe you, although you might even tell the truth at a particular point of time, and you have the tendency, the action similar to the cause, to lie again, you know. Then the environmental results, you know. Just being among people who cheat all the time, or people you cannot trust, you know. So sometimes you can see different people in in society, or people in politics sometimes, not all of them, but yeah, some of them, yeah, they use this quite a bit. The lying aspect, right? Yeah. So then at a particular point of time, people just don't believe them anymore, because they know they're lying, right? So yeah, if you engage in that again and again, then you have also these environmental results, that you are with other people who you cannot trust, and then becomes a mess, basically. Yeah, that becomes kind of a problem. Yeah. Okay, so that's lying, the first activity of the speech. Yeah. Then next one, slander. Yeah, or divisive speech. So lying is an activity of deceiving people. Yeah. If you it's also, you have to have a motivation to deceive people. Yeah, if a person asks you, how are you doing today, and then you feel a bit terrible, but you say, they say here on the street, they say, not too bad. It's a good one, actually, because you can go various ways, right? Not too bad. Yeah. So I liked it, because once some of the walkers here on the roof, they came in, and I saw them and asked them, when I was just new in London, then I asked them, how are you doing? And normally in India, we say, "Tea," you know, I'm fine, everything is fine. But they say, not too bad. I thought, is this person not feeling well, or is just a way to express it? But that's just a way to express it, right? Yeah. Is it? Yeah. So the segue. But if you say, yeah, I'm fine, while you're not, then it's not really, not really lying in the sense of really trying to deceive a person, like, saying something to make a person believe to get some gain or something like that, right? So they have to understand what lying actually is. We come to that later. Yeah. So divisive speech or slander is a kind of very nasty way of communication. For example, if you have a group of people who are friends, who live harmonious together, and you go to person A and you say, don't hang out with person B. Person B? Person B does this, that, and that. It's all based also on lying, in order to separate the two people. So to separate person A from person B, you go first to person A and say, oh, don't hang out with person B. This guy is not really, trustworthy, and this, and it's all not in accordance with reality. And then you go to person B and you say the same about person A. Try to split up two people who are harmonious together, or a group of people who are harmonious together, right? That's by itself quite harmful, right? If you split up a group that is harmonious, that's quite a harmful deed. Yeah, so that's this kind of fifth aspect of non-virtue, of slander, right? Yeah. So the ripening results of that is, if you do that, then it can cause you to be born in low states of existence, right? That's kind of a negative deed. Yeah. Then the result similar to the cause, the experience for something like this is, for example, having a few friends, or difficulty to have relationships, or being lonely, something like that. So it's kind of experience of that particular action that's been created in the past can cause loneliness, or not having many friends, or difficulties on sustaining relationships, for example, like that. Yeah, so it doesn't have to be, oh, I feel lonely these days. So that thing implies this, I've done this a lot. Yeah, it can be related, right? So yeah, but there's more causes and conditions that can be involved, you know. So that's also things to think about, right? Don't take it too direct. That's experience. Then the similar to the cause is having the tendency to do that again, yeah, because this unity again, you know, that's kind of this habituation pattern, right? So you can have the action similar to the cause again, engage in negative behaviors like that. Yeah, and then the environmental results, yeah, is kind of a rough environment, it says here. Yeah, uneven, or yeah. So yeah, or environment where it is very difficult to have communication with people, right? People, yeah, difficult to go along with people, so to say. Yeah, environmental results. Okay, that's number 5, slender or divisive speech. Then number 6 is insulting words, or sometimes we say harmful speech, you know, scolding people, saying nasty things about people, right? It's kind of this verbal activity that should be avoided, because that harms people, right? If you have insulting words, and then often when it's particular motivated with motivation to harm, then yeah, it's true, right? If a person scolds you with all kind of slang, or all kind of, you know, words or names, then it doesn't feel nice, right? So that's kind of why it's actually negative. So insulting words can cause a lower state of rebirth, but also other kind of negative forms of suffering. Yeah. Okay, and then the result is similar to the cause. Yeah. Then the experience is that, yeah, others might abuse you even if you speak very nicely and pleasantly, you know, or you say something nice, but then people think you meant something else, right? So it's this kind of yeah, aspects of negativities of speech in general, but in particular we hear, if people give, you know, interpretation, you say something nice and they say, oh, this person said this because of this and this reason, you know. So that can be an experience in accordance with the cause. Yeah. Then the action you again have according to the cause is kind of a tendency to again be hurtful, or using language that is hurtful towards others. So it's kind of, yeah, that's quite this is quite straightforward, right? It is kind of a negative deed to engage in. Yeah. And then environmental results, it says, you know, kind of rocky or stumps or a lot of trees with sharp what's called kasa branches, something like that. Yeah, it's kind of yeah, but also probably that other people, you know, that as many people you know, scolding each other, kind of environments, most likely. Yeah. Okay, so that's number 6. So those things are not too difficult, right? I mean, like killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, slander, and insulting words is quite easy to be understood, and it's not too difficult to abandon those. Yeah. Then number 7 is one where we engage in quite often. You know, it doesn't look very harmful, but it can be quite a waste of time, as we call it. And that's this next one, number 7 in line, is kind of senseless talk. You know, for example, yeah, we do that a lot. I mean, people in general speaking in society, you know, you talk about the weather or TV programs or politics or you know, we engage a lot in those kind of conversations, right? Yeah. Oh yeah, this. And before you know, for hours we're talking about a TV program or the weather or politics, but we cannot change politics, and just talking about TV programs or the weather is not really very constructive in our development, so to say, right? So certain conversations are very constructive and certain are not constructive. Yeah. So when I went to when I was back in the Netherlands one day, and my aunt had her birthday, and I was a monk for already quite some years. I thought, wow, birthdays, monk, yeah, but yeah, family, so I was not home very often, so only once every few years. So okay, see my aunt and see the family, and then well, why not? And then I went, and then sitting on the side with my aunt a little bit and talk about the weather and TV programs. I cannot talk about much, so I don't know much about it, but weather I can. And then about different things in society. And then we went into the mind in destructive emotions, so to say, a very simple conversation about destructive emotions, And then, very interesting, then for a few minutes, and then, you have tea and cake, as we do but in Netherlands, we have coffee and cake, right? Anyway, so then end of the party, and went back home, and then later on she wrote me an email and called me and said, wow, she said, it's the first birthday I thought that was a beneficial conversation. It's very interesting because we talked about something constructive about the mind and very simple, right? Yeah, but that helps, so most of our conversation, and sometimes you have to relax. I do the same thing. We go for walks and talk about the weather, and we talk about, different things in society, and, it's okay. But if you go in too much extreme, people can talk for hours like that, right? And then is the question if that's very constructive or not, so yeah. Probably what I'm talking about. If you get more into spirituality, you start to see the emptiness of that's not much essence in talking about TV programs all the time, this. Yeah, if you really want to be happy, then the TV programs are not going to make you happier, right? So you have to do something constructive with the mind, but you have to be skillful, because if you're with friends around and there's no interest, then there's no point in forcing them into these principles of Buddhism or something. That doesn't work, right? Only when people have an interest and they have questions, you can answer. But other than that, you just keep quiet and show a good example and just go with the flow kind of thing, right? So that's very important when people just engage in these kind of spiritual kind of direction in life. You can see that sometimes the friendship shifts, right? That the old friends, I had the same thing when I, became into Buddhism, and I, stopped going to parties before I actually began Buddhism. I went to do spirituality in Chinese medicine and martial arts and the philosophy. And then I was 21, and then stopped going to parties and relationships also. I lost interest. And then a few of my friends thought, oh, Namdak is going completely crazy. But yeah, it's kind of, then certain people, yeah, that's true. The interest is different, right? And then you make new friends in another kind of community, and yeah, that shifts, no? Yeah. So yeah, the conversation with Kasa, senseless talk, is this kind of conversation that is not constructive, right? So that's why it's been classified as a non-virtue, yeah, because it doesn't produce a kind of constructive ways forward, yeah. So the ripening results can be a low state of existence of other forms of suffering, right? And then the results, in accordance with the cause, is twofold again: experience and action. The experience is, Kasa. The experience is that people don't listen to you, for example, right? Even if you try to talk seriously or try to explain things, but people just don't like to listen or something like that. Yeah. Or when you give a talk or a lecture, people fall asleep or something like that. Happens to me, so I've done this quite a lot. Yeah, even in this life, yeah. Yeah. So yeah, so that's a kind of experience similar to the cause. Then the action similar to the cause, to do that again, right? To just hang out, to talk about all kind of, TV programs, something like that, Yes, yeah, people can relate to that, right? Yeah, so yeah, this kind of, yeah. Okay. And then environmental results, yeah, also that activities are maybe not that successful, you know, so that whatever you engage in, that activities were not that successful, or the rain falls at the wrong time, kind of those kind of environmental results can be a cause of that as well. Okay. Then number 8, covetousness. Yeah. Covetousness is kind of a form of strong desire or attachment to want to obtain certain objects. Yeah, so it can be even a cause for stealing, for example, right? So if you really get so attached to certain objects and you want to get at, then that is a motivation. So covetousness is a mental state, right? So we just went over the 3 of the body, yeah, killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, yeah, and then the 4 of the speech, lying, slander, harmful, what did I say? Harmful speech, right? Harmful speech and senseless talk. Yeah, so those are the 4 of the speech. So now the 3 of the mind, yeah. So covetousness is the first aspect of the mind, yeah. So it's a kind of a strong form of desire or attachment to want to obtain particular objects. You know, that's kind of disturbing, right? Can be very disturbing. So the ripening results can be lower realms or other forms of suffering. You know? And then the result similar to the cause is you will be unable to accomplish your aims, what you want. You know, it's true. You know, if you have this wish all the time and then go in that direction, but you don't get it, kind of experience similar to the cause. And then the action similar to the cause, you continuously being dissatisfied and you grasp for more and attachment increases, you know. Yeah, and we see that very clear covetousness with wealthy people, you know. Not all wealthy people, because some wealthy people, they do a lot of charity and they help a lot, you know, in society. But some wealthy people, they want to keep all the wealth, or they want to go into space, you know, for 10 minutes and then pay a lot of money for that. Yeah. But then they have done that and say, oh, wow, it's such an experience, life-changing, da, 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 da. But then 1 year later, they want to do something else, right? It's kind of, there's no end to, there's no satisfaction in attachment, right? So attachment only overestimates the qualities, as we talked about many times. And then it's like drinking salty water when you're very, very thirsty. That doesn't really solve the problem. Yeah? So wherever stronger desire there is, and you think, oh, after this and after that, and then there's never real satisfaction. Or with TV or internet or music is kind of same thing, right? We listen to one and then, oh no, it's not enough. I want to listen to another one, or I want to see another movie, or I want to see another thing on the internet. Yeah, so it's kind of because of attachment, we just keep going, you know, very thirsty, you know, keep going, keep going, keep going. But that by itself is not very constructive, you know. Yeah. And then sometimes we're a bit tired, you know. It's one of the masters of the past said, if you're tired, better take a nap and then have a fresh mind and continue with constructive ways of thinking, rather than when you're tired just watching the TV or searching the internet. Because then you're watching TV or searching the internet, the tiredness goes. But the tiredness does actually go. You get distracted, so you don't feel the tiredness, right? So then you search the internet, so you look at TV and you're not aware of the tiredness, like, oh, great. And then you don't even think that. You didn't think, okay, that's great. You know, so, but then you switch on TV or you switch off the internet and you feel much more tired after than before. Yeah, so it's kind of attachment is very sneaky, you know. It's like very sneaky on the corner of my mind. If you follow me, I tell you, you get benefit, you know. But actually, it's not really true, right? But we believe it often, and then we follow that attachment, and then we end up into trouble, or with our mind, or you know. So attachment is very sneaky, you know. Wants us to believe that if you follow attachment, then attachment says you get benefit. Don't worry, you get it. But then it actually doesn't really come, and then there's no satisfaction, as we talked about quite a few times, because we overestimate the qualities and we have too many expectations, and those expectations are not met. And if the expectations are not met, then we don't have satisfaction, right? Yeah, yeah. So that's kind of a bit covetousness. Yeah, did I say the experience? Right? And then the action, did I say that? Yeah, so yeah, being dissatisfied and grasping again. Then the environmental results is to live in a place where there's pure material resources, for example, you can think about, you know. Yeah. Okay, so then the next mental non-virtue, which is harmful intent. Yeah, so harmful intent is a wish to harm others. Yeah, so harmful intent by itself is involved with anger and aversion and hatred, you know. So harmful intent is kind of not very healthy, you know, because it can create causes for a lot of suffering, not only for yourself, but also can motivate physical and verbal behaviors to harm others, right? Yeah, so harmful intent, ripening result can be lower states or something similar, you know. And then the result similar to the cause, the experience is a person easily gets kind of frightened or panic kind of situation, yeah. So there can be an experience of have harmful intent a lot in the past. And then the action, you have the tendency again to have a wish to hurt others, right? So that's kind of by itself quite a negative state of mind, you know. Yeah. And then the environmental results will be a violent place, or war, or those kind of situations where there's a lot of violence around you. Yeah. Okay, so that's the 9th of the 10 non-virtues, harmful intent. And then number 10 is wrong views, you know. So wrong views, there's various types of wrong views, right? So here it's mainly referring to wrong views that, for example, law of cause and effect doesn't exist. It's not possible to change the mind. It's all nonsense. Everything is random, you know. So that kind of view is basically not very constructive, because everything is in the nature of dependence. Everything is in the nature of cause and effect relationships. We can change. There is law of cause and effect, you know. So yeah, that's kind of the wrong view. That if you have that wrong view, of course, they can also create all forms of suffering in the future. Yeah, as a ripened result. And then an experience similar to the cause is to misunderstand things, for example, difficult to generate understanding or realizations, right? Yeah, so yeah, I have that problem a lot. And maybe people who get into Buddhism, they see that also. You read something and think, what does this all mean? You know the feeling? Or when you try to meditate on things, but the mind doesn't really move in a particular direction, you know that? Yeah, so like the mind doesn't move. So yeah, I also have that a lot. So that's also part of this problem, having had a lot of wrong views in the past, right? Yeah, that creates that kind of experience similar to the cause. And then, yeah, the action, you have the tendency again to draw the wrong conclusions. You know, sometimes, yeah, oh, no, there's no law of cause and effect. Oh, no. You know, although you study a little bit and think, yeah, it's all nonsense, you know, so that's kind of the action similar to the cause. And then, yeah, environmental causes, that kind of shortage of food or shelter or, yeah, resources, so to say. Yeah, so now there are 10 non-virtues in relation with those, what is called, those various kind of ripening results and results similar to the cause and environmental results, you know. Yeah. So the 10 non-virtues are a very important aspect of the Buddha's path, because the Buddha said, okay, you want happiness and don't want suffering, so live in accordance to this law of reality. Do not commit non-virtue, right? And then what are the non-virtues? Then we talk about these 10 non-virtues, right? The 3 of the body, 4 of the speech, and the 3 of the mind. Yeah. So the Buddha said, okay, do not kill, you know, or do not steal, do not engage in sexual misconduct, do not lie, etc. So if you engage in these 10 non-virtuous, you create actually suffering for self and others. Yeah, and we don't want suffering. So then the Buddha said, okay, if you want happiness, do not engage in these 10 non-virtuous. Yeah, then you prevent yourself from creating a lot of negative karma. To be, yeah. So there's morality by itself, we talked about already a few times, is a very essential teaching of the Buddha, right? Because the meaning of morality is that not engaging in negative deeds. If you don't engage in negative deeds, then it means you actually engage in positive deeds. If you abandon killing, you engage in something positive, right? The abandonment of killing by itself is something positive. The abandonment of stealing is something positive. Yeah, so if you practice morality, you abandon negative deeds of the body, speech, and mind, and because of that, you actually engage in positive deeds. So then you create causes for happiness and you eliminate causes for suffering. So those who abide in morality, that's actually the best way to live your life. Because if you live your life in morality, then because of the actions you engage in, you prevent yourself from creating trouble in the future. You prevent yourself from creating causes for suffering. That's what it is, right? So that's why the importance of morality is very much emphasized by the Buddha, you know, that that is when the Buddha passed away, for example, then Ananda and a few other direct disciples requested the Buddha not to pass away, and then said, oh, please don't pass away, you know, and what do we do without a teacher? Then the Buddha said, morality is your teacher. It's very interesting, you know, that if you practice morality, that's the real guide in our life. If you practice morality, that's the right direction. So that's very clear in the Buddhist doctrine. And then also Lama Zopa Rinpoche once was being asked, what is the meaning of relaxation for Rinpoche? Because Rinpoche is a kind of a person who doesn't sleep, right? And that's by itself is quite uncommon. Yeah. If you're with Rinpoche, you can see that he doesn't sleep. You can check it out if you don't believe it. It's very inspiring, you know, to be around you. If you're with Rinpoche for some weeks, then you feel yourself completely broken, because for us, it's very difficult to go without sleep, or just 1 hour, 2 hours a night, or 1 hour, 2 hours a day. It's very difficult, right? When I was attending Rinpoche for 2 weeks once in Bogaya, then we only got maybe 1 or 2 hours a day, because at night it was always teachings, and during the day was all kind of other activities. And then, of course, sometimes you just, is it like that? You know, teaching. And then Rinpoche left, and I slept for a few days, day and night. So for us ordinary beings, it's quite difficult, right? But for these realized beings, it's very inspiring to see. You know, they go 24/7, basically. You know, it's very inspiring. You know, and then his personal attendant asked Lama Zopa Rinpoche, you know, sometimes maybe Rinpoche has to relax or take some time off, and then Rinpoche says, why? And then Roger, the attendant, you know, asked then, okay, then what is the definition of relaxation for Rinpoche? And then Rinpoche said, abiding in morality. It's very interesting, because if you abide in morality, you can take it easy in one way, right? Because you know you are creating the right causes for the future. You know you are creating happiness for the future. You know you are eliminating the cause of suffering. So that's why morality, from various angles, the Buddha explained very clearly that there is great need for the practice of morality, because law of cause and effect exists. It's not something the Buddha made up. It's just the science, basically. Science of the continuity of consciousness. That's what it is. The Buddha is more or less more of a scientist. Of course, in those days, there was no empirical forms of science, right? There was no fMRI scan, for example, to check your brain. But there was only the logic and reasoning, and then the Buddha's kind of clairvoyance, you know? So based on that combination, then the Buddha said, okay, this is the law of cause and effect. If you do this, that will happen. So engage in this to produce that. It's very, very straightforward. It's science, right? It's just a science of cause and effect relationships, and to live according to that law in order to produce the right results. Yeah, that's kind of a few things to know. Then another aspect I was planning to explain this evening is an aspect of when is a karmic action complete, or when is a karmic action heavier or less heavy. That's important to know, right? Because we have constant activities, and in relation also with the 10 non-virtuous, when is the action complete and when not? And what is the result then? Because we engage in various activities, right? And when is that activity complete and when is it lacking something and incomplete? So that means when it's complete, the ripening results, as we talked about, the ripening result will be very strong if a karma is complete, either positive or negative. If a karma is incomplete, then the ripening result will be less strong, right? So let's have a look at the act of killing, for example, in relation with 4 points. So first, those 4 points, important to be understood. So that's the first point, is there's a basis. Yeah, that's very important to know. There's a basis or an object, for example. Like with the act of killing, there's a person. Like said, let's say Peter, right? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, but yeah, that's a very common name, right? Yeah. So let's say Peter, right? So that's an object there. Yeah. Then, for example, with act of killing, if there's a if there's a wish to kill Peter, right? There's an object Peter. Yeah. But then there's an intention. An intention is subdivided into 3. So there's an object being 1 point, right? Then the intention is subdivided into 3. And what are those 3? Motivation is 1. Yeah, in this case, a motivational wish to kill, for example. Yeah, so there's a basis, there's an object, there's a person, then there's intention, right? And intention subdivided into 3. And what are those 3? Motivation, 1, the wish to kill in this case. And then the second aspect is affliction, right? An affliction can be present in the act of killing. You can kill a person out of anger, right? Or like, for example, an animal you can kill out of the attachment for the meat, right? That's also possible, right? So that means that you have a wish to kill. There's a basis. That can be Peter or an animal, whatsoever, right? Human or an animal or whatsoever. And there's a wish to kill, the motivation, and there's an affliction. Yeah, you can kill out of anger. You can kill out of attachment to the flesh, for example. And you can kill out of ignorance. That some people think is good to kill, or because you accomplish something, or you like in gangs, for example, right? If you kill a person from the other gang, then you be treated as a hero or something like that. Yeah. So you can also kill out of ignorance, right? Yeah. So yeah, you can engage in killing with those 3 aspects of the motivation, right? The motivation, the affliction, and the affliction can be either attachment to the flesh, the animal, or anger, right? Or out of ignorance. Yeah. And then the third factor is what we called, this is a very important factor, is called discriminating factor, right? So the discriminating factor means Peter is Peter and it's not John, for example. Or when you kill a sheep, it's a sheep and not a dog. So discriminating factor is also an important aspect in this process. Yeah. So there's a basis being 1. Then there's an intention. And intention is subdivided into 3: motivation, affliction, and discriminating factor. Yeah, so that's kind of important to know. Yeah, and we come to that to see, because then by depending on these factors, you see if karma is complete or not, right? And then I will explain. Yeah, so there's a basis and there's an intention, and intention subdivided into 3: motivation, affliction, and discrimination. Yeah, discriminating factor. And then the third point is action. Yeah, you can kill with poison, or you can kill with a weapon, right? So there's various methods to end life. So that's kind of what we call the action. Yeah. And then the last point, number 4, is the final step, or completion, as we call it. Yeah. So the completion means the person you kill dies before you die. Then the act is complete. Yeah. So let's go over those factors with the act of killing. So, for example, there's an object, right? Let's take a sheep in this case. Yeah. So there's a sheep, and that's the object. Then you have a wish to kill, because without a wish to kill, you never kill, right? So there's a motivation to kill. Yeah, the motivation is present. Then you say, oh, I'm attached to the flesh of the sheep, for example, and that's why I want to have that for dinner or something like that. So that's kind of the attachment, right? You kill out of attachment. Yeah. Or when the sheep is making too much noise, meh, that noise, and then you get so irritated, and then yeah, you can imagine people can do that, right? They get so irritated and they kill. Yeah, they do even do that with humans. So that you kill out of anger. Yeah, or you can kill out of ignorance. For example, some people do animal sacrifice in certain kind of places on the planet. So you can kill out of ignorance, thinking, oh, if I kill this animal and offer it to the local gods or something like that, or the spirits or something like that, I get something out of this, right? So that, there are cultures on the planet who do that, right? So that's killing out of ignorance. Yeah. So killing the sheep. Yeah. Then the method, yeah, or the action, you can do it with a knife or with a gun, yeah, for example. So there's the action or the way of killing, and then the final step is that, or the conclusion, that the animal dies, the sheep dies. Yeah. So you see, if all those factors are complete, there's a basis, there's a sheep, right? And there's a motivation, wish to kill. Whatever affliction you use doesn't really make a big difference, either attachment or anger or ignorance, but also the discriminating factor, knowing this is a sheep, right? Yeah. So you know that this is a sheep. Yeah. And then you do the action, let's say with a knife, for example, or with a gun. Yeah. And then the final step means the sheep dies before you. So if you have all those factors complete, then it's a complete karma. That's what we call a complete karma. That has the power to have this ripening result we just talked about, the ripening result to create a cause to be born in the lowest states of existence. That potential is there if all those 4 factors are complete: the basis, the intention, the deed, and the final step. And in the intention, there were 3, remember? There was the motivation, the affliction, and a discriminating factor. If all that is complete, then the karmic action is complete, right? If one of those factors are lacking, then it's not a complete karma. For example, you're planning to kill Peter, right? It's a bit dark, and you think, oh yeah, that's Peter, but then actually it's John. So you kill John. Then the karma of killing Peter is not there. It's still negative, right? Killing a person is still negative, but the karma of killing Peter is not there. So it's not as heavy as having that factor, having all those factors complete, right? So if all the factors are complete, it's considered as a complete karma or a heavier karma. When one of those factors are missing, for example, the discriminating factor is missing. Yeah, you kill the wrong person, and then you also regret because you killed the wrong person, for example, right? So that means that that's still negative karma, but it's not as heavy as understanding this is the person with the right intention, with the right understanding, with the right kind of affliction, with the right kind of tools, and then the person dies, right? So you see there's a difference between a complete karma and not complete karma, and a complete karma is actually heavier, and less complete karma is less heavy. You see that? Yeah. So that's also true for positive things, right? If you, for example, want to make a donation or you want to give something to a beggar on the street, right? Yeah. So then you can walk by and you see people on the street, you ask, do you need anything? And then you go to the Tesco or get the person there. I got the person one a chicken burger. He asked for a chicken burger, so I got him chicken burger. So you go to the shop and buy something, and then but then also whatever virtue you do, you try to make complete as possible, because whatever virtue there is, we have to have complete. The more complete our virtue is, the greater the results, right? Yeah. So then also when you engage in charity or helping a person, or a person who likes to talk, who has a problem, and you dedicate your time for that person, right? And then you know there's a person who is in need, right? There's a basis. Yeah. Then your motivation is pure. I'm going to help this person, you know, because the person is in need, for example, right? Then the affliction doesn't have to be present in general, but ignorance is always on the surface, that you always think we come to that later. There's always a grasping at a self, so to say. Yeah. And then the discriminating factor is that, okay, this person is in need. I need to do something, right? So then it's that, and then the action, you do the best way you can, rather than just throwing the chicken burger in the person's lap. You can just kindly give it with respect, right? So then the action is perfect. And then the completion is that the person obtains that particular thing that person needs, or you talk with a person who needs to talk, you know, who needs a person to talk to, right? So then when all those factors are complete, is a complete virtuous karma being created. But if you a little bit, your motivation not correct, yeah, I have to help this person, actually I don't like it, but yeah, whatever, you know, then the karma is not as strong, right? So you can see there's a very important aspect, that all those four factors, when they are complete, then also the virtue becomes stronger, right? So either positive or negative karma, when these factors are complete or incomplete, that actually shows if the karma is complete, the karma is heavier or has a greater potential. While when those factors are not complete, then the karma is less heavy and less greater potential. You see that? So if you're clever, then you should have, with negative karma, you should always have factors incomplete, right? And with positive karma, you should always try to have all factors complete. Yeah. So if you practice in that way, then you move in a particular direction. Yeah. So with negative karma, you try to do regret, and then we come to that in the next week, how to purify. Yeah. So then we engage in actually the purification aspects of karma. Yeah. So that is it just gives us a little bit of a guideline when a karma is heavy and when it's less heavy, and when it's complete and when it's not complete, seeing if these factors are all present or not. Yeah, does it make sense or not? Yeah, so then, because we create so many types of karma all the time, and certain karma ripens in a particular rebirth, and certain karma ripens in, as we saw, environmental kind of results, right? So the karma that is complete, when all those factors are complete, then it has the potential to have a ripening result of a next rebirth, for example. If one of those factors or more are lacking, it doesn't have the potential to throw you another rebirth. Yeah, like either with positive or negative karma. But then it is, for example, what we just talked about, the environmental results, right? So that means if, for example, you practice this kind of generosity, right? For perfect, you do everything perfect, you know? So then it can throw you in a good rebirth, right? But then you don't do it perfectly, so there's some things lacking. So then it only is the environmental kind of result. So you might be born in a particular difficult war zone, but you always have the right things to live, because you have the right circumstances for food and shelter. Yeah, because in your previous lifetime you created kind of good karma of helping others, right? So you can see it's very complex, right? Certain karmas are complete and other karmas are incomplete. That's why certain karmas are heavier and other karmas are less heavy. Does it make sense or not? in the relation with ripening result and the environmental results. Yeah. So, for example, and there's an interesting always, kind of, for example, a human existence is, generally speaking, a positive ripening result, right? The existence of the animal realm is, generally speaking, a negative ripening result of negative karma. Humans of positive karma, animals of negative karma in general. But there's also a possibility of the environmental results. Yeah, so there you can be born as a human, but be born with a lot of famine or a lot of war or lacking food or drink or shelter, right? So the environmental results might be negative, while the ripening result was actually positive, being born as a human. And then you can be born in an animal state, right, which is a negative result, but the environmental reason might be good, like think about the pets in the West, for example. Yeah, some of the pets in the West, they're better off than humans on the other side of the planet somewhere, right? So then there's a negative ripening result, but a positive environmental result. You see that? Yeah, so there's various possibilities, you know. And you can have both, for example, being born as human and have everything you need, or you be born as an animal in very difficult situations. Yeah, so you can see there's various possibilities in various states of existence because there's various types of karma being created, either complete karma being created or less complete karma being created or halfly finished actions, you know. So it's, you can see it's a very complex system of completely finished, half finished, or just a little bit present or not. And so then you can see this, if you multiply that with lifetimes, then it becomes a very complex system of activities and potentials or information, whatever you like to call it, that comes to ripening at a particular time. Yeah. So yeah, that's more or less what I was planning to talk about this evening. Yeah. Yeah, and karma, I said before in the beginning, it's very challenging. And just if it's all too much, just put it aside, no problem. Yeah, that's also true, right? We are discovering Buddhism, you know, so certain aspects of Buddhism, you think, okay, it makes sense. Certain aspects of Buddhism say, oh, it doesn't make sense. Then you just put it aside for the time being. There's no issue. Right? I won't get angry about that or something like that. You just have to examine and discover, is this true or not? And why is it true or not? The reasoning behind is very important, right? That's very important. As the Buddha said, analyze my teachings, don't accept it because I say so. Right? You just check it out. Does it make sense or not? You know? Yeah. I find the karma also is still quite challenging, but yeah, if I bring a little bit of science into it, I find quite helpful. You know, particular in the fields of quantum mechanics, how things actually exist and what is the correlation between particles and that over time, how is information carried over time, and how does information over time influences the future, right? So it's a very interesting principle of the materialistic world, but consciousness is very similar. You know, that's very interesting material in certain aspect of Buddhist philosophy, but talks about very similar principles in quantum mechanics and in consciousness about these kind of possibilities of producing results, as we call it, right? So there's a lot of things, and it doesn't come overnight, you know, to understand these aspects. Yeah, it's kind of years of contemplation and years or decades of going back and forth, and then slowly you think, oh yeah, maybe this, maybe that, you know. Yeah. So yeah, make sure you take your time for it, right? Yeah. And if it's a little bit heavy sometimes, then karma, then you just put it aside, you know, and have a look later, right? There's nothing wrong with it. Yeah. Okay, so if there's any questions with karma, then yeah, you had one from last week, right? Yeah. You didn't forget, no? Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for that. It's really interesting. Do you think it's useful to kind of map out your karma? Like think about all the bad karma you might have accumulated. Just reminds me of almost like 12-step programs where you'd write all the people you've done bad things to and go and apologize to them. Yeah. Is it, or do you think it's better just to kind of move forwards in a positive way? I guess maybe next
I
week
mean,
we'll go on to this.
Both, basically, but we don't really know what we have done in the past, right? Yeah. In this life, okay, we can remember certain things, but previous lifetimes we don't really remember. Yeah. So then we just do a general purification as we go over next week, how to do this purification. Yeah. So you can generally thinking, okay, you go this 10 non-virtues, for example, and you think, okay, I must have created these things in the past, right? And then you purify those aspects. Yeah. But then also life has to go on, right? It's the same as when we do something wrong and we regret it and we really don't have a constructive form of regret and we have this self-guilt and this kind of, you know, that motivates this low self-esteem. That's not very constructive, you know. So when we did do something wrong, we say, okay, I did this wrong. It was not correct because of this and this reason. And I'm going to try to change it and I'm going to move forward. Right. And then it's very constructive to move forward and don't think about it too much and worry about it too much, because that is not constructive. So that we're going to talk about next week, how to do that. Right. Yeah. But yeah, you can in general, yeah, try to purify negative karmas that has been created since beginner's lifetime, as we say, which we don't remember, and then move forward. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Does anyone in the Gompa have a question?
Other comment.
Hiya, thank
Hi.
you for your teaching. My question is, you've answered this one a little bit, but am I trapped in karma? And is everything that happens to me a result of previous karma? So do I have any free will? Or is it all mapped out and I'm just trapped and suffocated?
Yeah. Free will, I don't know if I can answer that question, but in one way, everything is related, right? So nothing is there without a cause, you know? So that means whatever we experience is created by previous moments of consciousness, previous activities, you know? So then the question of free will comes. There's a lot of debate in science, as you know. I was in Oxford 2 weeks ago giving a course also on Buddhist philosophy, because I Buddhist mind science and philosophy, and also this question, of course, came up. I almost died in the car accident when we were discussing free will. Yeah, but free will, you know, even according to like Anil Seth, you know, a neuroscientist we had a dialogue with last week, his interpretation is quite nice, because free will, and I think it's very similar in Buddhism. Free will is kind of within a certain boundary. There's a possibility, right? You can choose to go to the Tesco or Sainsbury to do shopping, for example. That free will is there, right? But you cannot go to Albert Heijn, for example, which is a Dutch supermarket, because they're not present here, right? So you mean that you have a kind of boundary in which there's a possibility. But also from our mind, because of previous habituation patterns, we have done various things in previous lifetimes. So there are a huge amount of probabilities there. So within those probabilities, there's a possibility of doing this or either that. But if those probabilities are equal in number, then we can do this or either that. But if one aspect of the probability is higher and the other one is almost not existent, then most likely we will follow this direction, right? So, and that you can see with habituation patterns with criminals, for example, that they try to change, and then if they go to a prison where it's not very constructive, then they fall back to old habits, although they actually don't want to, because of the inclination of the mind is too strong, you see? So in that way, it's very scientific, right? If there's probabilities of certain events in a similar amount, then there's a higher rate of a free will, right? So that's, nothing is beyond cause and effect. Free will cannot be beyond cause and effect. But within a particular boundary, there's a possibility to change the mind. For example, if you have Alzheimer or you have a tumor in the brain that prevents you from developing, then you don't have the free will to develop, right? But for a healthy person has that potential, and has a free will to develop. But that also depends on previous similar habituation patterns. And there's just the amount of probabilities. And within that boundary, there's a possibility of going either this way or that way. Does it make sense or not?
Yeah, because I find that good things happen to me and bad things happen to me. But is everything that happens to me my fault?
Don't say my fault, not in this life, but in one of your fault in one of your previous lifetimes, right? And yeah, we all make mistakes, you know. So that doesn't mean that we should have kind of self-guilt or something. That doesn't work. When you just think, okay, I made a mistake, what we're gonna see next week, you have this very constructive form of what we call very constructive form of dealing with it, right? And then you move forward and you purify. So you move in a very positive direction. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
Any other questions in the Gompa?
Thank you for the teaching.
Yeah.
Simple question. Do you create positive or negative karma in sleeping?
Sleeping. Generally speaking, no. Yeah, sleep is an exception to creation. Although when you wake up, how you react to what happens in the dream, that has an influence, right? So you might dream about punching a person you dislike in your dream. That by itself is not negative karma, but then you wake up, you think, oh, great. Yeah. Then that's kind of what we call a harmful intent, right? So in the waking state, that's a harmful intent. Or when a positive thing, you know, thing that you think about helping another person, you wake up, said, oh, that's great, I really want to do this. Then that creates something positive, right? So the dream itself doesn't really create karma as such, although it influences habituation patterns. Right, so that's definitely true. And then how we react to that pattern is, of course, has a reaction or a result, right? So it's not beyond law of cause and effect, as you can see, right? Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. Basically, when these people kill themselves,
Suicide, yeah.
Suicide,
yeah.
And they come in the family tree, mother, the grandmother, the mother, the mother. This is karma.
Family tree?
Suicide.
Yeah, suicide.
Family. In the family. Tree family.
So there's more suicide in the family, and then
7.
So there's
7 generations.
There are people that's
killing,
kind of
on the end they kill themselves.
Because their parents did it as well, or something like that. Interesting.
There's a pattern.
I mean, it's I mean, that probably an habituation pattern of seeing others doing similar things might influence yourself, right? If you see your father or your mother or family members engaging in these kind of activities, then you might choose to do yourself as well because it's closer to you, right? But it doesn't really, I think, imply that it's in the genes or something like that, right? Yeah, some people might. There's some research been done with mental.
Apparently with women with menopause, are very dangerous.
Yeah. So with mental, there's some research been done, but it's not really. What the research comes through is more the external conditions that are similar rather than the genes, right? In these kind of cases of mental issues or suicidal.
That's no karma then.
It's all related with karma, right? But it doesn't mean if your parents are suicidal, you have to be suicidal. No, that doesn't. But there's a possibility there because your parents, they have created the karma to be suicidal. You have created the karma to be suicidal. And that's what we talked about in the previous evening is things are, karma is individual, right? As we talked about in the previous week, karma is individual, consciousness is individual, but there are common forms of karma, as we talked about collective karma, remember? So that means that people have created similar causes in previous lifetimes, and then as a group, they experience an accident or a plane crash. That doesn't mean they have all created the karma together at the same time and same place. It's still individual, but they have similar creations. And one person dies with a cut here, another person dies with a cut there. So it's still individual, right? And the same with this aspect of what you mentioned with suicidal kind of aspects within family or something. That's just, they have all those generations, they have similar karmas being created in the past, right? Yeah. Yeah, does that help? Yeah, okay. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of, yeah, it's very sad, suicidal, but yeah, that's kind of, in Buddhism, it's not really the way out, right? No. Because if you think about future lifetimes, then yeah, just end this life doesn't imply the next life will be perfect, kind of thing.
A lot of people pop up. It's just wake up dead lately. Young, 90, 88, 22, 35. I work with people basically. So I meet all these different people in different countries. So basically, they just pop up and dead. So is it finish the journey, or?
I mean, it's a similar thing, right? The cause of death is not random, you know. So if it's a heart attack or whatsoever, you know, yeah, or die or whatsoever, then that's not beyond cause and effect or karma, right? So they have created the cause to die earlier in life, right? Yeah, 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 yeah.
Sorry, I just had one more that just made me think of something else. Could you have something happen to you that seems like bad karma, but actually maybe it's good because it puts you in the right direction? So I don't know, an event that happens that, I don't know, I'm just thinking of like a health condition or something, but maybe it changes your mindset.
Yeah.
So it puts you on the right path in a way.
That's a common view, but we don't really at one point of time think, let's create causes for a sickness because then I can learn in my next life. We don't act like that, right? So people often think, oh, I have to experience this because I have to learn from this. But we have experienced sickness since beginner's lifetime, and we never really learned from it, right? But the thing in Buddhism, what we try to use it, right? That's a different thing. Not that we have to experience this because we have to learn from it. That's not really the correct interpretation. But you have created countless forms of suffering, causes for suffering, right? And now you experience this sickness. So you know that, okay, that's created in the past. So then acceptance is there, right? Which is a very important aspect of a problem. If it's sickness or mental difficulty, if you have acceptance, it's much easier to deal with it. Yeah, so with karma, you think, okay, I've created the cause for this. That's one aspect. Yeah. And then you can deal with the sickness much better because you see it's just law of cause and effect. And then later, as we're going to talk about in a model on bodhicitta, then you use it as an opportunity to take the suffering of others upon yourself, right? And then think, by me experiencing the suffering, may others be free of suffering. And then becomes a very powerful purification. Maybe next week we can talk about a little bit how that relates, because you then think about others and want to help others. And this sickness is a ripening result of having harmed others, right? So it becomes a very kind of strong purification, so to say. Yeah.
Okay, there's just a few online that I'll come to. Abelardo, I believe you were first. Would you like to unmute yourself?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Geshe. My question has to do with vegetarianism. I'm not a vegetarian, and so I feel guilty about that sometimes. But I don't kill the animals directly. Yet it's on my conscience that, that someone did the killing, and I'm cognizant also of the fact that the Tibetans, for example, Tibetan Buddhists, they eat meat because they have to for the harsh conditions they live in. So how do they go about, or how can one go about rationalizing this or channelizing the guilt, thoughts and feelings?
Yeah, of course, it's very good if you can be vegetarian, because then, you don't have the guilt, and you also don't, because the more meat we buy, that implies that more animals have to be killed, right? So that's one aspect to think about. Yeah. Another aspect is that you buy it in the shop. That's when we just talked about karma to be complete, those 4 factors, right? So when you buy meat in the shop or you kill an animal yourself, there's a difference in the heaviness, right? Yeah. So that's also a thing to think about, that with those kind of, as we just talked about, when karma is complete and not, if you buy it in the shop, there's no wish to kill in that particular relation with the animal. There's no discriminating factor of this and this animal, for example, right? So a lot of those factors are not complete. The action is not there, right? So that means that if you buy the meat in the shop, then it's not as heavy as having killed an animal yourself, right? So there's a difference there in karma. But if you have to eat meat for health reason, or like people in Tibet, they always, because there's no other food available, right? Particularly in the early days, and in very remote areas, then what they try to do, although there were a few masters also vegetarian and promoting that aspect, but then they make a lot of, they do a lot of prayers for that particular being, that being makes a contact in this way, and then do various prayers for that, or you recite mantras and blow on the meat, for example, right? So in those occasions, this doesn't mean to say that you get rid of all the negativity that's been created, but it becomes less heavy, right? That's what it is, right? So every act of that has to do with killing, of course, is a negativity being created. Yeah, but then you look at those. That's why we just went over those points to see when karma is complete and when not. Yeah, and then you can play with those things. And in particular, if you then do prayers for those beings you have to eat because of health reasons or whatsoever, then it's much better than not doing those prayers, right? And so there's kind of things to think. And, or for example, what some people do is medicine Buddha mantra to blow on the meat and make a strong prayer for the being who passed away for this particular meat, right? So then it's less heavy than not doing those prayers, right? Yeah. So there's a few things, you can think about. Yeah.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I have a very practical question. Next week it will be our last class. What will happen with the review session?
The review session is scheduled after that, right? So I think they have the dates, no or not?
Yeah, I'll send around an email about that next week, Abelardo. So after the final session on karma, we will have review sessions for the past 2 modules, but I'll put all that information in an email for you guys.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Jeff?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the teaching, Geshe. I used to live in Malaysia and Thailand, and as you know, there are a lot of mosquitoes there, especially in the evening. And I'm not going to get too worried about it right now, but it was very difficult sometimes not to kill them, especially say if I was sitting in a room and there was one on my arm and I knew it was going to bite me. Anyway, I did meet, there was a lecturer that I knew in Thailand, and he told me that if he said, if there are mosquitoes around you and you have a clear mind and you don't feel hostile towards them, and perhaps he had a meditation practice himself, he felt that they wouldn't bite you, or maybe that they would be less likely to bite you. Do you think it is possible for that sort of action to be, that sort of thing to be cultivated or to happen? So to be able to have a sort of presence that it was less, the mosquitoes were less likely to bite.
I mean, if you have
I was a bit skeptical.
If you have a very pure mind that doesn't have the karma to be bitten by a mosquito, yes.
Okay.
Right? But until then it's still possible. But it's a very easy solution, because you know, you can catch them. It depends, you know, some mosquitoes are easy to catch than other ones. If you have a big container with a lid, it's quite easy, especially when they sit on the wall. And then they go inside the container and they put a lid and just then put a few holy objects on top and then you release them outside. Or if you sleep and it's dark and, you know, then if they just bite, most mosquitoes, I experience, because in India, we have a lot of them as well. So they bite and they suck themselves full, right? And they're too heavy to fly. So you can hear the buzz is different when they have a full stomach. So go, and they're on the wall for a few hours, so they don't disturb you anymore. Yeah, so that's an option.
Yeah, very interesting. If I go back, I'll try that.
Yeah, good. But in the UK, there's not many. I haven't seen many, you know.
It's easier here.
Yeah.
Kusum?
Thank you, Geshe, for the teaching. Thank you very much. My question is a little bit similar to Belardo's question that came out already. So just to ask, if we engage in non-virtuous act, but out of compassion or out of, you know, a positive motivation, let's say, for example, Peter is killing a sheep, but he needs to feed his family and there's no other food. And so he's doing it out of compassion, or any other example, you know, let's say, I don't know, I'm telling Peter to not talk to John because John engages in illegal activities, you know. So like if the motivation is compassion or something positive, is it still like, is it an incomplete karma, or is it a less heavy karma, or how does it work?
I mean, when compassion is involved, you know, then there will be more kind of regret over the action you're engaging in, right? So it will be less heavy, but it's still act of killing, right? Killing out of compassion, still you have to have a wish to kill, otherwise you don't kill, you know. So it's still a negative deed, you know. So that's still something to be purified, you know, even if you kill out of compassion. Yeah, so there's no exception for nobody on the law of cause and effect, right? So even if you kill with compassion, and there's various interesting stories in the Buddhist doctrine about bodhisattvas who kill out of compassion to save others, right? Yeah, so one person has the plan to kill many, and then you think, oh, if this person A kills all those people, then this person A creates so much negative karma and goes to lower rebirth for a long time. And all those people are being killed, the family suffers and they suffer. If I take the life of this person A, I prevent person A from creating this negative karma and creating all this suffering to others. But that doesn't mean that the person who gets engaged in the act of killing person A, even though it's a high realized bodhisattva, still has a negative karma to deal with, right? There's no exception to the law of cause and effect. Yeah, although there being a strong compassion for both sides, for the person, the killer, as well as for the victims, right? But still, because he engaged in the act of killing, still he has to, or she has to, you know, deal with that karma, right? Or purify it or whatsoever. So there's no escape, so to say, of law of cause and effect. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Very clear. Thank you.
Yeah.
Katharina?
Yeah.
Thank you, Geshe. Thank you. Yeah, the more I learn about karma, the more baffled I am about the very good conditions I live in and all the marvelous things I have. But my question is, my parents came to visit me, and this is a situation where I find myself having irritation on my mind. And I'm not really an angry person, so I try not to engage in anger and angry thoughts, but it just happens and I get irritated, and sometimes it does come out. But especially having these angry thoughts or these moments of anger on my mind, I was wondering what kind of karma is created by this, basically.
By the angry thoughts.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's very, I mean, there's no harmful intent, I hope. Right? No. So that's still kind of karma of irritation is still there, but it's not as heavy as harmful intent, as we just discussed, right? Yeah. But still, it has a potential in the future to cause a kind of suffering of the mind, for example, right? And you feel that most likely quite direct, you know, when you get irritated, then the rest of the day is slightly unpleasant, right? Yeah. So you can see the result of just a little bit of irritation. You can see that straight away in the mind, right? So we talk about lifetimes kind of things, but these kind of aspects of a destructive emotion, like irritation or anger, that produces suffering, that cause and effect relationship, we can personally experience and learn from that, right? So yeah, so then try to analyze it for yourself. Sit quietly one day or every day, and then just check it out. What is this irritation? What does it do to me? And is it beneficial? And should I follow it? Or maybe I should have a more mind of patience, you know? So if you analyze the faults of the destructive emotion like irritation, and you come to a conclusion, and then you focus on that conclusion, and then you contemplate the benefits of practicing patience and focus on that conclusion. If you reach a conclusion that patience has more qualities, then over time the mind will shift. Yeah, the mind will shift in the sense you get less irritated and capable of practicing more patience, and then you produce actually more happiness, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of a possibility, you know? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so can we give you that as homework for the coming months or something?
Yes,
yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, Geshe, there's just one in the chat, but I think it's a quick one. It says, I heard that one can get enlightened, then lose the enlightenment.
Oh.
Going back to Tathagata Garbha, what is the karma for that?
There's no karma for that. Basically, you cannot achieve enlightenment and then go back. Enlightenment and nirvana is irreversible, right? Because if you have achieved enlightenment or achieved nirvana, you do not have the causes for suffering anymore, because the afflictions are being taken away. If the afflictions are being taken away, you can never suffer again. You can never fall back. Yeah, so that's kind of, although there are realizations that can degenerate, right? If you have a little bit understanding of the nature of the mind over some time, and that degenerates again. Yeah, or you're on your part in practicing patience and things go well, and then a new person walks into your life and you lose it again, right? So that doesn't mean that you have accomplished enlightenment and you fall back. It just means you haven't really completely eliminated anger together with the potentials or the seeds, right? So nirvana or enlightenment means you have eliminated afflictions and their seeds, right? So that there's no potentials anymore for afflictions and for suffering. And so that's kind of good to be understood. And we come to that later in the model over things about, you know, Four Noble Truths and nirvana, you know, those kind of aspects of the possibility of having a mind that is free of afflictions and free of the seeds of the afflictions, or the potentials for the afflictions. Yeah. And that's irreversible. Then you don't fall back anymore. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. Yeah. Karma is a bit challenging. So yeah, just take it easy. Okay. Yeah. Don't get too hyper about karma. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let's dedicate to completely understand karma and ultimate reality based on the motivation of bodhicitta, wanting to liberate all sentient beings. Yeah, and we dedicate in those directions.
Dage jine sape gewa di tendan jowa gunda gempendan geba jesun lozan japai tempe nikbo ringdu jeju.
May the glorious Guru's life be long and stable, and may all beings equally extend space of happiness. And may I and others without exception accumulate merit and purify negativities,
and may we be blessed to quickly attain Buddhahood. Judges and Rinpoche, Make Panam Gigeshe, Kipan Yampa Mepa Yang, Gone Gongde Bawa Sho, Tony Tawa Rinpoche, Make Panam Gigeshe, Kipan Yampa Mepa Yang, Gone Gongde Bawa Sho.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, good night, sweet dreams, and I'll see you next week.